Hello, everyone, and Happy New Year 2022. We welcome you all to the Happiness Journey podcast with Dr. Dan, where every journey is worth living. My name is Dr. Dan. I'm your host for today's episode. I'm a cognitive behavior psychotherapist specializing in anger management issue, both court-appointed and private, marriage counseling, dissociative disorders, narcissistic personality disorders, depression, anxiety, dream analysis, and also provide life, business, and retirement coaching support. I provide individual one-on-one session and also group settings. If you need any assistance, reach out to DMV Therapy and Coaching Services at 301-325-1550. And our website is lifecoachdanamzalak.com. Today, I'm very excited to have for our season 3, episode number 9, a very special guest and author of multiple books, Michaelbrent. Just like every of my past episodes, I will leave it to the guest to properly introduce themselves, as no one can do a better job. Michael, the floor is yours, my friend.
I think lots of people could do a better job introducing me. But yeah, I'm an author. I am best known for horror fiction, but I've written bestsellers in like a dozen different genres. So I've been really blessed to just be a storyteller and be able to tell stories. And that's what I do for a living. As far as being here, the particular emphasis that we've been talking about. And first of all, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of it. Because mental health is so tremendously important. And it's not just our own internal stuff. We have to deal with a world where more and more people are realizing they have, these quirks, we'll call them. For myself personally, I have major depressive disorder. I was diagnosed, I don't know, 15 or 20 years ago, but it was well before that it was kicking in. I also have suicidal iterations and psychotic breaks. The last one is the one where, when I say that at a party, people are like, oh no, he's going to bite my face, and it's not like that. And that's one of the problems with some of these words is they're accurate diagnoses, but they're misused in the media or in movies. And so it's like, I say that and people think I'm going to be Hannibal Lecter. Yeah. And it doesn't help that I do write the scary books. So, but all it means is like my brain sometimes does not perceive reality properly. Okay. And some people have auditory hallucinations where they hear things that aren't there. And that's happened to me, or see things that aren't there. And that's happened to me. But by far the biggest kind of way it exemplifies itself is just some days I wake up and you cannot convince me the world is better off with me in it. And it's severe enough that it's like, it is an actual dissociative state from reality, because my wife can come in, and God bless her, and tell me all the nicest things about myself and hold up statistics and, smiling pictures. And it doesn't matter, because in that moment, the reality I'm functioning in bears no relationship to the one most people experience.
Wow. Now, how old were you when you first start noticing the signs, or noticing the depression, or even did the suicide come after a very severe depression, or did they come simultaneously?
That's a good question. I'm not positive, because a lot of things, it's like I lost my hair. It didn't all just fall out, all of a sudden I realized I'm combing my hair at my girlfriend's house and she had a mirror set up behind, because girls have those things.
Yeah, they have
and
every angle.
yeah, I was like, oh my gosh, I didn't know I had a bald spot. And that's the way a lot of mental health stuff happens. It creeps up on you until it's big enough. It can potentially be a problem. I had to go get a new haircut. So I do remember, I think my earliest memory of myself having this situation is coming home after high school. I was a junior or senior, and just laying down on my floor. Like I had gotten into a shower, I came out with my towel on, and I just laid down on my floor and fell asleep. And I wasn't tired. I just didn't want to face the universe anymore. And I remember my mom waking me up and me turning over and looking at her and just consciously going, I don't like it here, and rolling back over. And the last thought being before I fell asleep, I hope I don't wake up. And it was something that, like I say, it crept in, but we were also used to it. My whole family, people ask if depression runs in your family, and I say it more like gallops, because my dad has it severely as well. And it was something we just grew up with, kind of facing as a reality that we don't live exactly the same as other people maybe do. And one of the biggest tricks is realizing that's okay. You deal with your reality, not the reality that you perceive of the person next door.
I am extremely impressed because Michael, you took that negative aspect of yourself and you transformed it into something amazing. Because someone who, I mean, I am an author myself. I have sometime writer's block. I
Mhm.
come across the screen and nothing comes out, absolutely nothing, which can cause depression.
Yes, it
When you have
can.
deadlines, especially when you have deadlines. So, how did you, or when did your mind or yourself decide, I want to be an author? I
Oh
want to
gosh.
take all that and put into writing, and especially the genre that you're writing is not so. I mean, it's pretty scary. I mean, just the
Yeah.
background that I see in with all the books that you wrote, it's pretty freaky. This is like a Stephen King kind of author. So, tell me what brought you to write this kind of genre.
Well, I was doomed at birth. Like I inherited, mental health issues from my father, and he was also the creative writing director for a major university. So I kind of grew up with just writing was something everybody did in my house. And it wasn't like I'm going to write a book today. It was just, well, I'm writing. And, by the time I was 11, I had written a book. And again, same thing with the horror, because my father, one of the things he did at his university, he did critical studies. So he was the number one, literally in the world, expert on Stephen King for about 20 years.
Wow.
So I tell people I grew up with typing or screaming in the next room. He was watching a Stephen King movie or, typing something out. And I can remember coming home and it was kind of an awesome movie image. I was really young and we walk up to the porch and the light was burnt out. And there's this box. It's like 8 by 8 by 8 is what I recalled. And my dad had a little flashlight and he shines it. And the return address is Stephen King, Bangor, Maine. And my dad looks at me with like the lighting, and he's like, if this is a human head, I'll be very disappointed. So it was just kind of what we grew up with. And we have my family has a different perspective on horror because of that. Because my dad, one of the first things he said was, these are scary books, but if they're done right, they're the most uplifting, because they teach people to be survivors. Even in a scary movie or a scary book where everybody dies at the end,
Yeah.
the one person who survives is the reader, and they close the book and they've lived through it and they've made it. And it kind of gives you this sense of like, I can do hard things. I've survived this vicarious experience, but I'm also now going to set this story aside and go start living my own story. And hopefully, if you do it right, people come out uplifted as well as scared.
Well, so is there any of the books that you write or that you wrote, a personal experience of your own life, some kind of like autobiography by any chance, or is it only fictional?
Yeah, it's so I've never written an autobiography, and part of that is because of the depression. Like there is no way my brain's going to be like, you're important enough to tell people.
Yeah.
And you roll with that. Again, you make accommodations. That's just not a project I will be able to handle.
Okay.
But I do put a lot of myself into my books. My wife and I lost a child, and that was obviously horrible and traumatic and difficult. And I wrote a book eventually called Apparition, about parents, in the story that there are parents who are kind of possessed by a demon and try and kill their kids. And a lot of it was me trying to kind of figure out this life and death situation. And obviously I popularized it. I made it more, edible for audiences, because I also think if I'm going to write a story, it shouldn't be therapy. Like I pay someone else for therapy.
Okay.
They don't pay me. So I shouldn't expect my audiences to do that. But within that realm, again, like this is something super important, is that no matter where you are in a mental health spectrum, I have met tens of thousands of people's, like I speak at Comic Cons, I do signings, I do all these things. And I have never in my life once met anyone who was not valuable, who didn't have a story worth telling, and who didn't have a story worth telling to me personally. And I'm not just talking about like fans and people like that. I'm talking about people at the grocery store. I substitute taught largely special needs kids for several years. And I found them delightful. And it doesn't matter how smart or how dumb you are, kind of on an IQ test scale. It matters if you care to be out participating in the world to the best of your ability. And that was something that was incredibly important to realize, was like everybody out there occupies a critically important space. And the worst tragedy for mental health, I think, is when it causes us, we who have to kind of deal with it, to withdraw. Because as long as you're out there in the world, as long as you have people that you are accountable to, it's really hard to make permanently bad decisions, as long as as their accountability matters, So I have a wife and I have a kid, or I have kids, and some days, honestly, there have been days where I'm like, I'm not going to kill myself. And the best reason is it would make a mess. And I don't want them to clean it up, or I don't want my kids to have to suffer through that. And if I became a misanthrope, and I just kind of became Gollum in his little cave, you'd find me hanging from the rafters within weeks, because we just can't occupy any kind of healthful space when we're alone all the time.
Do you feel by any chance when you're going through depression, and sometimes people do put themselves in a cocoon because they do not want to go into society and being judged? You see
Yeah.
that we have the tendency that if we're not perfect, we're not like those influencers with the greatest body, with the greatest intelligence, with the greatest wealth, and so on and so forth, we're not good enough. I mean,
Yeah.
we self-criticize so much about why are we not like the people that we see on Instagram or that we see in on Facebook or whatever it is. So this in itself, Michael, really puts us in a position where we're never going to be good enough. And that being not good enough, we tend to feel anxious about it. Then anxiety will bring depression. Then it becomes a vicious cycle that where does the link break? And that's the main question. How do you personally yourself, with all those thought of suicide, how do you say to yourself, I'm not going to do it?
Okay. And that goes back to why I'm saying, like, look, every one of us, and it doesn't matter if we're healthy or if we're not healthy mentally or whatever. And I use those kind of in quotes because that's such a sliding scale for everybody. But no matter what, there are moments, unless you are the worst of the worst, that is, there are people out there who are utterly incapable of interacting with reality. And that is horrifying and tragic, but most of us aren't there yet. We have moments of lucidity, moments where we're our better selves, the versions of ourselves that come closer to our idealized selves. And in those moments, we have to take that spot and that instant to get out there and make connections, because how do I not make these life-changing decisions? Well, my wife comes in and takes my car keys away. And I'm not kidding. You need support, and you don't want to be in a position where the support you have is state appointed, where you're like in prison or in a mental hospital because you've been committed so you won't hurt yourself or hurt someone else. It's just better to be like, hey, I'm okay today. So I am going to go out and say hello to my neighbors. And it doesn't have to be earth-changing stuff. You don't have to be the center of the party, and you don't have to like start a charity that feeds millions. Just get out there and freaking make cookies for somebody, or just buy cookies, go get some Oreos, hand them to the neighbor. And I mean, can you imagine just that interaction? Here, I needed to get out and I don't want to make cookies, so here's lazy cookies. Like, that's a conversation right there. And the problem we have with social media, especially, is because no matter how good you're doing, there's always somebody who's doing better in that thing. I sit next to authors sometimes who are brand new on at a Comic-Con or something, and they're like, oh, I'm embarrassed to sit next to you. And I think that's so funny because, of course, there's the person on this side, and I'm like, I'm embarrassed to sit next to you. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, with your career or your love life or whatever, there's always going to be somebody else who looks better, because we only observe these out of context snippets, and our brains, particularly if we do have mental health problems, we interpret them in our most self-damaging light. So rather than say, yeah, my friend had a cool, gorgeous plate of food, we're like, he always eats like that because he's rich and famous, and oh my gosh, I just saw my selfie, and it's like we just spiral and spiral. And it's a much better mindset to get out there and say, hey, I'm going to find somebody on social media who sounds sad and just say hello to them. So by reaching out and making these little tiny things, the process of self-betterment and in any area of your life, it's not a thing of big gestures. It's like a coral reef. The Great Barrier Reef is this miles long monstrosity of beauty and scary stuff and cool stuff. And it's like humans, it's all full of different things. But at its core, it's just billions of little one-celled animals. And that's all we need to do is go out and make those tiny, tiny gestures. But if we do them enough times, it starts to accrete and it becomes more ourselves and more who we identify with until, yeah, we have days like it doesn't matter how good I feel today. If tomorrow I'm having a psychotic break, everything is awful. But I have people who will come into the room and say, I know everything feels awful, but can you trust me that tomorrow might feel better? And of course, I'm looking at myself as terrible, but they're awesome. So if they're telling me tomorrow will be better, they're not liars. I'm a liar. I'm ugly. I'm stupid. I'm Elvis. But that person, my neighbor that I took Oreos to, says tomorrow might be better. And so maybe I should trust that. So it creates all these interconnected safety nets. The more we go out and the more we treat the world like an opportunity rather than a curse or a responsibility.
But I think that despite the challenges that you're facing, Michael, you have a good head on your shoulder. It's really interesting on how the disparity between the mental illness, but yet when you speak, I would never ever in my life guess that you're dealing with a psychotic issues or even depression. Never, because you talk with so much confidence. You talk with your conversation is very fluid, very easy to understand. You're not trying to complicate the conversation with crazy words and
Give me time.
yeah. But it's very, very simple term in which it's hard to really fathom that someone like you are going through very difficult crisis at times. So either you're a very good actor and you know how to hide it, or you just know how to surf that wave that you're in life, which is a very interesting metaphor on how I can perceive what you're going through. So let's say if you would have come to me and we would have had the conversation and said, Dan, I need help because of this. I said, are you kidding me? Do you really have problems? I would never, ever guess. So it's interesting on how, because usually people that come to me for help, they're in a crisis mode. They say, oh my God, I've seen this. I saw that I want to jump off the Golden Gate Bridge. I want to do this. It's always in panic.
Yeah.
So it's interesting on how you basically change the way that how other professionals are perceiving you.
Yeah. And you talk about it as like being an actor or surfing, and I like both of those, but I would also posit a third option, which is just you practice it and it becomes a habit. And I mean that literally. So like speaking of the snippets, so I'll do something like this, or I'll go to a Comic-Con or I'll speak. And then afterwards, when we're done, I'm going to turn off all the lights and sit quietly and try and recover from the trauma of dealing with you. As nice as you are and as easy, as this is, it freaks me out. But I can do it. And the reason is when I was a kid, I was really small and I was quite smart and I was obnoxious. So it was just like, if you could have designed a person more perfectly to get punched a lot at school, I don't know how you would do it. And I realized like it wasn't working for me. Obviously, seeing the inside of lockers was not as fun as they make it sound in the movies. And so I found somebody friendly who is my mom. My mom is like the friendliest person anyone has met. Actually, she goes to Comic-Cons and she sits next to me sometimes, and she's got bright purple hair in her 70s and she wears steampunk clothes, and people come up, I'm like, can I sign a book? And they're like, I just want to talk to the cool old lady. So she's this wonderful person. And I went and I said, Mom, how do I stop being hated? How do I make friends? And she gave me a list. She understood the question. I wasn't asking for theory. I wanted help. And so she made me a list of 10 things that were like, smile, say their name, compliment something. And I didn't learn the list all at once, but I remember going out the next day and just being like, I am going to smile at people today. And it probably looked ghastly and terrifying to them because I wasn't good at it. But you keep doing it, you keep doing it. And over time, I internalized it. And it's like muscle memory. We can drive our cars when we're in severe depression or crisis mode. They drive to your office, because we have that motor memory. And emotional motor memory is a real thing as well. So on days where you're horribly down, you're like, I'm going to put myself into a situation where my practice comes into play. Suddenly I find myself at the mall saying hello to the person behind me. I don't really want to, but I'm doing it because that's what I've practiced doing over and over and over. And that act of speaking to that person, I have to kind of punch a hole in unreality to get to them. I have to reach out a little bit. And again, it is not magic. It doesn't solve everything. And I'm not like, if you have friends, you'll never feel sad again, because that's ludicrous. But if you make these efforts over and over and over again, then on days where you're just spent, you can do it automatically, and then you have to recover afterwards. Like I say, when I go to Comic-Con and it'll be 3 or 4 days, and then I come back and my family knows they are not going to be able to talk to me very much at all for the next 2 days because I'm not capable of it. And that's part of the cost of my job, and everyone's on board with it. And that's the secret, is they all know, and they're there to support me in those instances. And then likewise, when I'm feeling okay and my kid comes home and he's had a terrible day, like he's going through emotional trauma as a high schooler for the first time, and big loves and big hate and all of this stuff. And I can sit there and listen to his skewed version of reality. So the more people you can treat well, just practicing, and then it becomes second nature. And then all of a sudden you're like, gosh, I've been faking liking people, and I actually think I like people. What a surprise. Like they're not all horrible. And that's a really wonderful thing to be able to realize, because again, as bad and horrible and ugly and gross and stupid and dumb and all of these things as I am, I now know other people are kind of awesome. And if these kind of awesome people are saying, Michaelbrent, we need you, I I don't trust me, but maybe they're right. And that just has to get you through, this particular bump. It's not like it evens out the road. There's always these speed bumps forever and ever. But if you can have somebody pulling you over it, getting you back to the smooth space, that's the secret. It's not about being a cure. It's about managing it and about properly responding to it. And if you can't respond to it properly, having systems set up so that other people will respond for you.
Oh, wow. So I may assume, and I know that a lot of people now, it's becoming a very common term in psychology. It's what we call imposter syndrome. And I'm sure that you're dealing with
Oh
it
my gosh.
24/7. So for some who always feel that, why will people trust me? How did I get here? How did I write all those books? How did I do this? How I'm not good enough. I'm not this. I'm not that. How do you, and you said, I think you answered somewhat that question, that when you come back from Comic-Con, you take 2 days to kind of like decompress, if we could utilize that term, to be able to kind of like bring you back to a reality that you're more familiar with, within the reality that people put you in because they seek your advice or they seek your knowledge, etc. So how do you manage all that without really wanting to jump off the Golden Gate?
Oh, there, I do. I just want to jump off it. It's just, again, you have somebody grabbing you, being like, don't do that. And it never goes away. It's funny because, like, at this point, well, here's a good point, is that if you can accept your reality and your limitations, again, you can set up systems. So similar to coming home from Comic-Con and my family knows that I'm going to be horrible. At a certain point in every single book I write, and I've written close to 50 at this point, I come down the stairs and am so sad because I realized while going to the bathroom that this is the book where everyone will realize how crappy of a writer I am. And I will lose my audience, and they will probably burn my home. And like, it's just going to be the worst. And so it never goes away. And I could be sitting again on a panel next to a person who has written like a humorous limerick and that's their publishing career, and I'd still be like, I could never write a limerick that good. Like you're always going to find something that they're better about. And so you can't get rid of it. But again, if you have other people going, but like, my wife goes, you realize you've sold a lot of books, right? And no one's ever come up to you at Comic-Con and like punched you for wasting their time. So just the weight of evidence kind of would seem to indicate you're doing okay. And then I go, but that's stupid. Just everybody's dumb. Everybody's idiots. And I fooled them by being slightly less dumb for 100 pages than they are, And again, then that's where she goes, okay. And she calls it my depression goggles. She's like, you're wearing, and it's a code word. She says, you're wearing your depression goggles. And that tells me she is perceiving something utterly different. And it's happened enough that you can't convince me in that moment I'm wrong. You just can't, because that's the problem, is the wiring is off. It's not like, oh, well, I'll just decide to change, because the thing that's busted is your brain. It can't make that decision. But right then I can find an alternate route to a different place, which isn't killing myself or harming myself or making some permanent decision over a temporary issue. My decision is, well, I'm just going to trust my wife and not do anything for the next 24 hours. And then if she comes in the next day and things are still terrible, because depression isn't like a momentary thing, sometimes it can last a long time. She says the same thing, you're wearing your depression goggles. And I think the same thing, well, I'll just hold out till tomorrow. Tomorrow never comes. So if you can hold out till tomorrow, you will be okay. And it's really hard to believe in the middle of it all, even tomorrow, it's like tomorrow will never come. And that's when the person goes, well, tomorrow came yesterday and it came the day before that. So maybe, again, just trust me. Let's see how the next 5 minutes go. Just don't do anything dumb. Let's just chill here. And 5 minutes later, look, it happened. So maybe tomorrow will come and maybe it'll be better. I think a lot of the time people try and talk themselves up with absolutes. Tomorrow is going to be better. Tomorrow I'll, succeed. Tomorrow I'll be happy. And then tomorrow comes and it's not the case. And of course, that just digs the ditch 1,000 times deeper, because now you have evidence that your mistaken thinking is correct. And so instead, say maybe tomorrow I will feel a little better. Maybe tomorrow, I can't, when I'm broken like this, when I'm feeling down, I can't even hope that tomorrow will be better. But I have found like I can trick it by saying, but maybe tomorrow I'll hope it'll be better. So I'm hoping for tomorrow's hope, not that tomorrow will be better, just that tomorrow I can face things better. And instead of saying tomorrow I'll be up and at 'em and I'll write 10,000 words and my books will hit the bestseller list and I'll be happy, I can just say, maybe tomorrow won't suck this bad. And then it does. Sometimes you get to tomorrow and it's even worse, and so you just say it again and again. It's that practice. Maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow, maybe tomorrow. And again, it only works if you have people who love you and support you and who you love saying, yeah, let's do that together. Because waiting till tomorrow by yourself is horrific. I mean, how many times have people been up in the middle of the night, and that's the loneliest time, 2 or 3 a.m. and everyone's asleep, and you're like, the night is lasting forever. And that's how time feels when you're in a depressive episode. It's all lonely, it's all empty halls, it's all ghosts and memories, and it's all very dark outside. And if you are just existing that way, you're in real trouble. But if you have your spouse or your friend come over and flip on the lights and be like, hey, why'd you wake me up? It's really late. Tomorrow's only 4 hours away. We've got to get some sleep. It keys off some things. It triggers this mausoleum I'm walking around in. It's not really dead after all. There's people here. There's other people I love, and there's people who love me. Tomorrow comes in 4 hours. Maybe tomorrow will be better.
Do you happen to struggle with that inner voice that always try to push you to follow through with suicide or with any other malicious intent that you may have to put from within you? How do you fight that voice, Michael?
Well, I guess that's a beneficial thing of being a fiction writer is I exist with voices in my head like 24/7. That's my entire career path. So I'm at least pretty good at talking to them.
Mhm.
So if I have a voice that says, get in the car and drive off a bridge or drive into a bridge abutment or off a cliff or whatever, I can look at it and try and argue it a little bit. And again, it's not like you don't go, that's not true. I'm totally happy. But I have said, I don't want to do that. Here, we got a new car. And I was like, don't let me drive the old car if I'm depressed because it's paid off. And I would be fine driving that off the road, but I wouldn't leave you with payments for a wrecked car. Like that would be so mean of me, you know? So if I'm feeling at all blue, my wife goes, take that car. We haven't paid it off yet. You know?
That's a good strategy.
Um, yeah, you can set, but again, that's something we figured out ahead of time. You can't figure that out in the moment. Like, what's a logical trick I could make that will trick me into not making any bad decisions? You have to do some work ahead of time. You have to set those systems up so that when the bad things occur, you know, it knocks over a domino, and instead of the rest of the dominoes going off the cliff, they go to a hug.
Mhm.
And you really, really, really need to do that.
Wow, that is, I could just imagine the complexity behind everything that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. Because you're here, you're a successful author, having written over 50 books, published, and being on at the Comic Con, having you doing some talks to people who wants to become as successful as you, but yet internally you're suffering. You're dealing with those struggles that no one could even guess if they don't know you in a personal level. So kudos to you, Michael. I am extremely impressed, and I feel like really honored to be able to talk to someone like you who have written so many books. And for me, I thought for a while when I wrote my first book, I was jumping up and down. I was so glad. I said, "Oh my God, I'm an author." Many people were saying, "Ah, Dan, that's just a fluke." I said, "Okay, like my second and my third and fourth and fifth, all the way to 10." And the thing is that I have the writing in me, but at the same time, I still feel like there's a much more accomplished author out there. So yes, I self-criticize my ability to be able to write because there's going to be others that's going to have a better ability. You see what I
Mhm.
mean? So like
Yeah.
you said, you could be sitting by someone who's looking up to you, but then you're turning your head to the left. Oh, I'm tiny in front of this person. I have not accomplished remotely of what they've done in their lives. So again, it's a constant battle that we all
Yeah.
have, but yours is accentuated because of the depression, because of psychotic event that you're dealing with on a day-to-day basis. But yet, look at you with 50 books in your under your belt. So wow, that's all I have to say. WOW. So
Oh, just really quick, I feel the same talking to you. Like, people who have real jobs like blow me away. I was a lawyer for 10 years and I maxed out my real job capacity. It was really hard, you know? And being an author is hard in different ways, but like, it's so funny because as you say these things, you said, I only wrote my first book. And I was like, that is amazing. Like, that's so cool. And then I go to my psychiatry practice and I'm like, you do that, and again, that's a benefit of this practice, because when I was this kid being beaten up and shoved into lockers, if you had said those things, I would have said like, yeah, you kind of do suck, which is why I got shoved into the lockers all the time. But after 30 years of practice, now it's a much more automatic response to hear somebody talking and to go, oh wow, that is really neat. Here, if you want something really funny and fun to do, go to a party. I did this with some friends at a wedding reception. We were all groomsmen, and about 15, the line goes by and you don't know anybody.
mhm.
You don't care about anybody. They don't care about you. They're there for the bride and groom. They don't know this Yahoo in a rented tux. So my friends and I were about 15 minutes into eternity, and we're like, this sucks. Let's make a game. We're going to compliment every single person who walks by us. You can't repeat the compliments, and they have to be sincere. And you have like 6 seconds. So sometimes it was like, I love your buttons. It was kind of silly compliments, but we got everybody. go to a party, go to a public gathering and say to yourself, I'm going to say a nice thing about every single person. Not have a conversation. Conversations are terrifying. Just they're horrible. They're awful, but like most of us can whip by and literally just be like, cool eyes, and then, and then be gone. And if you can do that enough, just look for those good little bits about people, then you start to really love people. And loving people, by the way, I think is the best way to succeed in any business endeavor, because you start to appreciate them and people notice that, and then all of a sudden they're like, hey, how can we help you out? I have people who don't like scary books at all, who have bought every one of my books just because they say like, oh, I saw you at Comic-Con, you were funny and didn't take yourself seriously, and I thought, I'm just going to buy his books. And so someone's sitting there with $200 worth of ebooks on their Kindle that they're never going to read. And that happens a lot. And you'll do that for other people. You'll be that person too. Sometimes just by saying, hey, I like the buttons on your sweater. They're like, that's what I needed to not jump off a bridge. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Those small moments matter.
Sometimes I always feel that self-deprecating humor is always a good tool to be able to make other people feel comfortable, especially if someone like you who have accomplished so much, but yet you allow yourself to put yourself down from a pedestal, even though you never feel that you're on top of one, but you put yourself into the same level as everybody else. So, by doing this, people feel, oh, wow, okay, he could accept insulting himself and laugh about it, and not feel less of a person just because he is putting all the attention on him, even though it's a negative attention on him because of the self-deprecating. But again, Michael, I'm honored to have had this opportunity to be able to discuss with you, especially I don't really interview so many authors, but an author that I have done so much and have helped so many people, despite the challenges that you faced, I am in awe. That's all to say. And again, if we had more time, I would go on and on with this podcast. But unfortunately, that is all the time that we have for today's podcast. But I really do appreciate you taking the time out of your very busy schedule to join us. I'm sure by the time that we had this podcast, you could have written another book.
I'm not that fast.
But thank you so much for participating and inspiring on many listeners with your incredible story and, of course, pitfalls that you've experienced. So we hope that you have all enjoyed today's episode, and I'm very excited about the many upcoming guests that we have scheduled for the year 2022 of the Happiness Journey podcast, filled with inspirational stories just like the one that you listened to today. So here are some concluding words of wisdom. To be a champion in whatever field you're in, I think you have to see the big picture. It's not about winning or losing. It's about everyday hard work and about thriving on a challenge. It's about embracing the pain that you'll experience at the end of a journey and not being afraid. Fear is what dictates people's behavior by not venturing into the difficult road ahead. It's a simple illusion constructed by your conscious mind to protect you from any possible danger. If your mind can't predict the danger ahead, so the danger doesn't exist. As Michael Jordan often said, you will miss every shot you don't take. Start taking these shots so you don't live the rest of your life with regrets and wonder how your life would have been. Stop thinking too much and start doing. My name is Dr. Dan Amzalang, and you may all keep pursuing your amazing journey in life.